You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Parker Angel, Locked On Cougs here. And I want to talk about basketball for a second. Obviously, I'm a basketball person. I got a Keem Olajuwon. I got a bunch of bobbleheads basketball. I like basketball a lot. Houston Cougar basketball is like the thing that gets me through the other 3/4 of the year, half the year, whatever it is. I love Houston Cougar basketball. I love watching Houston play fun teams. And we've been kind of piecing together schedules of what their non-conference schedule is like. I will point out that in years past, by mid-August, we have typically received the non-conference slate of Houston Cougar basketball schedule. It is August 14th, and as of the recording of this podcast, there is not a official non-conference schedule out. We did have a couple games confirmed. The Florida State game, for example, at the Toyota Center was confirmed, and the opener and the exhibition with Mississippi State was confirmed, right, by the university. We don't have an official schedule. NBA schedules are out, which gives us some insight and tells us what stadiums have what going on. And I want to give Chris Gardner credit because he has been on this for a second. And frankly, when I was looking stuff up, his name came up a lot. So I want to give him credit. I also want to give Joseph Duarte credit for putting names together. But right now, you've got November 3rd at Lehigh, November 8th with Towson, November 12th with Oakland, November 16th, you're playing Auburn in Birmingham, which is a big one. November 12th, you got Ryder. Then you have the week of Thanksgiving and the Player Eras Festival in Las Vegas, where you get Syracuse and Tennessee at least. Then you don't know who your third team will be. You come back from that to play Florida State at the Toyota Center. That one is confirmed. You then have Jackson State, New Orleans, and then you theoretically are playing Arkansas right now. Joseph Duarte has that one in New Jersey. More on that in a second. And then you have Middle Tennessee, December 29th, before starting Big 12 play in January of 2026. And so that Arkansas game in New Jersey has already been moved a little bit, and we haven't seen confirmations about that one. Now, we were excited at first about that being on 12/20 in New York City, December 20th in New York City, because we're thinking, okay, there's another big game in Madison Square Garden that night with Tech and Duke. Like, that's going to be awesome. Let's get in on that, get out back to like a one ticket kind of two game, get some fun hoops going. Not quite. And then Barclays opened. Oh, we're going to go play in an NBA stadium, Christmas time in New York. Still cool. That's awesome. However, we've got Madison Square Garden booked. Barclays actually has a women's basketball event with 4 Blue Bloods. It's got UConn, Iowa, Louisville, and Tennessee. That's been on the schedule. That was on the schedule before Houston was even rumored to play Arkansas. And frankly, they're playing in Barclays, which is also where the New York Liberty, the WNBA team play. I think there's something going on there with that. I'd also point out that UConn does very well in New York City in terms of women's basketball draw. And then you look at the NBA schedule that are now out in Madison Square Garden. The Knicks play at home on the 19th and the 21st, which means you can't play in Madison Square the night before or the night after that Tech, forget if it's UConn or Duke, whatever, right? The Nets have home games in Barclays on the 18th and the 21st, which makes like the 19th feel pretty unlikely, right? If they got a big event the next day. And so presumably you can't get it into New York City. So then it looks like, according to, and I will point out, I think Chris Gardner had that like early on, shortly after the game got announced, like, hey, this might not happen. He was quick to put an eye on that women's event happening there and kind of putting 2 and 2 together there. Duarte putting in Newark, I think, indicates there's probably some conversation of that happening. Has not been officially announced by the school as being in Newark. Presumably, you're going to play at the Prudential Center if you're playing in Newark, which is where the New Jersey Devils play. They do have basketball setups for Seton Hall, but it certainly doesn't have the allure at all of New York City, right? And frankly, that it has not been officially announced almost worries you a little bit. Like, wait a second, why hasn't it? Why not? Right? Look, I'm not saying the DFW Metroplex has the allure either. It certainly isn't like the wintry time of New York City for that, or that you'd think of, and it's not a big road trip to go see a new place because I mean, whatever, right? It's just up 45 from Houston. but it's probably more equidistant than basically anywhere else between Houston fans and Arkansas fans. And now the NBA schedules are out, we know that the Mavs, the Dallas Mavericks, are out of town on the 20th and the 22nd. So you could play that weekend against Arkansas somewhere relatively in the middle of the two. I didn't look over at Dickies Arena in Fort Worth, but I think you get kind of the same story there because it's a lot less used stadium. You could also, for what it's worth, try Jerry World in DFW. The Cowboys are playing on the evening of the 21st, even though it's that weird part of the year where there are the occasional Saturday NFL games and whatever. You could play a basketball game there and just say, hey, everyone from Arkansas, Houston, show up, man. Let's fill this thing up and sell cheap seats way up high and all that kind of fun stuff. Really get a raucous crowd there in the middle. The Cotton Bowl isn't for another week, and then the Big 12 championship game has been a couple weeks before that in football. So you really, you do have some nice crossover as far as like an empty space there for that Saturday. Listen, you don't want this game happening in Toyota Center if you don't have to. You wouldn't be breaking that 3 games number that declares Toyota as a second home arena per NCAA bylaws. This would just be this theoretical second game at Toyota Center. You're playing, as mentioned, Florida State there as well. But you would be ruffling feathers by getting close to that. You have already kind of ruffled some of those feathers and moving the ownership from that regional with the Sweet 16 and Elite 8 games. The South Regionals happening at Toyota Center. Houston made a big deal of making that not them hosting it anymore, even though it was initially them hosting it. And so, flirting with the other end of the reason that you might potentially be excluded from playing there. The NCAA says that you cannot play in a stadium that you played 3 or more games in your regional. You cannot be slotted in that regional, and it cannot be a regional that you are hosting unofficially. And so moving themselves off of host duty is certainly one thing. You don't want to be pushing the limit on the games either. Look, I want this game to happen for a lot of reasons. We've talked when the Big 12 Matrix came out about how the home and away split might have hurt Houston from a quad 1 versus quad 2 game perspective, just giving them, like, if you just inverted Houston's home and road games on the Matrix, they'd have, based on last year's records, a lot more quad 1 games. That's just the way it worked out. They're going to play some of the tougher teams at home. That would have been more likely to be a quad 1 game on the road than the road games they're going to end up playing for the most part, right? You also, we saw what happened last year at the Players era. On the one hand, you got Alabama, which was a really strong opponent. On the other hand, you got Notre Dame and San Diego State. And well, San Diego State gave you all you could handle. They weren't exactly the greatest teams by March and didn't help your quad 1, 2, 3, etc. Yes, you've got Florida State. Yes, you've got Auburn early. You also don't. Auburn is coming off of a very high with a very old team. Bruce Pearl's a good coach and all that, but who knows what they look like this year? They did a lot of transferring around. Florida State can be such an up and down program. You need opponents that work on your resume here. Arkansas with Calipari feels dead set to be one, and this game, it just feels like we should know more about it at this point, right? You want another quad 1 game, a neutral site. Calipari Arkansas team feels destined to be that. It just worries me a little bit. It just worries me, and frankly, I also just want to see the basketball. Like regardless of how it shapes up with quad 1s and 2s and whatever, and seeding it later. I also just want to see it. It's a good game, right? And so that's part of it too. So we'll see. We'll obviously follow up more as official things come out, and hopefully within 10 minutes of this episode dropping, this is obsolete because there's some big announcement that they're actually going to get to play in Madison Square Garden because it got lumped into some jamboree kind of thing there or whatever, right? Like, hopefully something fun like that happens. But whatever happens, we follow it here at Locked on Coogs each and every day. Now, trivia question would come at the end of the episode every single day lately. And given that we're talking about Houston versus Arkansas, I was like, okay, they've both been around for a minute. Historical basketball program. What is Houston's record versus Arkansas? So if you know their record against Arkansas all time in men's basketball, tell us in the comments down below. Bonus points if you know anything about any one of those games, because I only knew of 2 myself personally. So tell me in the comments down below if you know of anything about any one of those games. I just guessed. I told you there's more than 2 games. But anyway, tell us in the comments down below. Locked On Cougs, proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Cougs.